The event also serves as a critical window to enhance machinery and equipment to produce goods, support sustainable development, and ensure we are not dependent on developed nations. Indeed, this year's event could not have been held at a better time than now, with the imperative to support the federal government's renewed hope agenda to address the nation's economic crisis. Hence, the need to recognize the relationship between sustainable market and demand-driven research and societal development for economic growth and industrialization that are built on the untiring efforts of the organized private sector of our economy. Industrialization is one of the indices of measuring the development of nations, and the survival of manufacturing industries is dependent largely on the availability of raw materials. With more than half of Nigeria's revenue derived from oil exports, diversification from the mono-oil economy is imperative for the nation to achieve and maintain a solid, sustainable economic base. Thus, the theme of this year is the future of manufacturing, building a sustainable roadmap to the industrialization of Nigeria would not have come at a better time. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is noteworthy that my presence here is a demonstration of my ministry's determination and commitment to support industrialization by focusing on demand-driven research and development by the agencies under my ministry. The Raw Materials Research and Development Council is exemplifying this by its adherence to the development and promotion of pilot agricultural and mineral raw materials, as well as process equipment that meet the requirements of manufacturing industries. As the country embarks on the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, there is the need for consistent engagement amongst stakeholders in the raw materials and manufacturing value chain of the economy to avoid overbearing dumping of substandard raw materials and products on our shores from various sources across the world. To the glory of God, I declare this expo open to the glory of God and service to humanity.
So they'll have a quick group photograph, then they can go to their seat.
Nigerian economic challenge, we're talking foreign exchange, is because we are not producing. In 1996, I went to a summit in France, Europe-Africa Summit, called by former French Prime Minister Raymond Barre and Aspen Institute France. And the remarkable title of that summit was Africa Must Produce or Die. And so the question is, how do we finance producing in Africa so that Africa will not die?
I've seen the number of industrial manufacturing concerns decline in number among the quoted companies on the Nigerian stock market. And that makes me sad each time I think about it. I remember when I came to the market 33 years ago, the industrial goods sector or manufacturing sector of the Nigerian Stock Exchange back then was one of the most vibrant sectors, not even the banking sector. It was the industrial sector. Whether they are textiles, whether it was Onwuka High Tech doing nails and roofing sheets, as well as those who are into other forms of industrial manufacturing. But some of those sectors are gone completely off the market. The textile sector is completely gone. And these were companies that used to be in the face of everyone. Now, how do we bring all of this back? Now, I have a few ideas. And I think for all the efforts that we are making, and I want to commend the BOI, the Bank of Industry, the Bank of Agriculture, and a few others who are trying to bring a lot of things to the table. But I will advise those who are in the industrial manufacturing sector to approach the capital market. Now, I know that everybody will come up with a few things, issues around listing your companies on the market and approaching the market. This year, corporate bonds market is down over a year period at half year by about 86%. When you look at the commercial papers market, where you have some of the big names like Dangote and others have borrowed, has grown exponentially. But I look at the numbers provided by PwC this morning, and the manufacturing sector accounted for about 55% of the total, while the financial services accounted for just about 41%. That's as of June this year. And that means that the manufacturing sector is ready to push and pull its weight in terms of getting finance into the industrial manufacturing. But we can do a whole lot more into manufacturing, logistics. When I look at the stock exchanges of Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, South Africa, I found companies that are into these very key sectors listed on those exchanges, but they are not listed here. Now, why is this very important? Because it allows for international organizations, the DFIs, the sovereigns, to do business with you and be more confident with you if you are a listed company.
One of the things that is making cost of production so high in Nigeria is because today we don't have the infrastructure that could support either the manufacturing sector or any of these sectors. So if the outcome, for instance, infrastructure to GDP ratio in Nigeria is about 35%, it's talking about South Africa. South Africa is about 75 to 80%. So you can imagine how that economy could have all it takes to finance any sectors to boom. That is one point. The second point is that at the beginning of every economy, at the beginning, because the capital market is not developed, government gets finance from the central bank, right? But when you have moved towards, you have existed for a number of years, we expect that access to the central bank finance reduces, because that has implication on price in the system, which we call inflation, and inflation has effect on funding itself, because as you have rising prices, used cost of capital increases, and then those who want to access funds find it unbearable to access. That is one. The second part is that because inflation becomes unbearable, the purchasing power of people also is affected, and then what will happen is that their capacity to demand product falls. So suppliers will find it difficult to supply, because if there is no demand, then what is the need for supply? Because they have, from the fiscal side, they have been impacted so much that they don't have the capacity. Today, per capita GDP in Nigeria is about 2%. So talking about the capital market as having the platform for financing and having been impacted by the fiscal policy. If you look at the South Africa case that you are mentioning, for instance, market capitalization as share of GDP in South Africa is running about 0.20-something%. And Nigeria is about 25 to 30%. It tells you that our capital market is not developed. And the only way to make that develop, and that is why sometimes when people argue that when the central bank increase interest rate, and that in combating prices and people will say that in the other way kills businesses. But if you look at the second side of that transmission, when you increase interest rate, domestically you kill businesses, but externally you attract capital into the market, and what happens is that capital goes into money supply, liquidity increases. But for us, that could not happen because there are several other things that limit capital flows.
Right now, inflation is about 28% as of October, and this has been growing and tracking increasingly over the last couple of months. And the issue with inflation is that, one, it increases the cost of capital for manufacturers to get financing. Secondly, as well, is that manufacturers can pass the cost to their consumers, because the consumers are also facing increasing costs as well. So the margins are affected. And if you've seen what's happening over the last couple of months, a lot of manufacturers are shutting down and leaving the country at large. Secondly, as well, is that our exchange rate isn't stable. So we currently work with some massive manufacturers here in Nigeria, and it's very, very difficult for them to, get, the right dollars, the pounds to basically import raw materials into the country, pay for goods and services. And as a business, it's almost impossible to plan and budget on a yearly basis when your exchange rate isn't stable. Thirdly, is that our infrastructure is honestly far behind. We're still dealing with electricity issues. Our roads aren't, stable enough. And these are things that are really affecting the manufacturing industry across the entire country at large. But, as a Nigerian, I'm incredibly bullish that this current government would have the right strategies in place for us to scale through these challenges. And there are 4 things I'll focus on, or 5 things I'll focus on for the government to potentially implement coming forward. So one is that we actually need skills development. So if you compare Nigeria, the skill gap in Nigeria to other manufacturing countries like Vietnam, China, and India, there is so much we can do. A lot of people right now are focusing on white-collar jobs like finance, accounting, but we can start getting our educational system to focus more on blue-collar jobs that can potentially boost the manufacturing industry at large. And I think that these are low-entry jobs that can potentially help the economy, 2, boost the industry to potentially start exporting across the entire world as well. Secondly, is that tax incentives. For some reason that I'm not very sure about, the government has been making it very difficult for manufacturers to basically function, and they've been increasing taxes over the last couple of months. And if you're a big manufacturer, it's almost impossible to survive increasing tax.